Have you ever had one of those days where just getting out of bed feels like a battle? Where even simple tasks like replying to a message or making a meal feel impossibly heavy? You start calling yourself lazy, unmotivated, maybe even broken, and slowly that word, lazy, starts to stick. It becomes a quiet insult you carry around, a weight on your chest that nobody else sees. But what if I told you, you're not lazy at all? In fact, what you're feeling might not be a flaw in your character, but a symptom of a much deeper problem, a sickness in the very way our modern world is structured, a silent, creeping kind of illness that Carl Jung and other great thinkers warned us about, burnout. And not just the type of burnout you get from a tough week at work, but a societal level burnout, an existential exhaustion, where you're constantly pushed to perform, produce, and perfect until there's nothing left inside you. This video isn't just another motivational pep talk, it's a journey into psychology, philosophy, and a little bit of soul searching. We're going to explore how Carl Jung, Byung-Chul Han, and even ancient wisdom traditions like Stoicism and Taoism offer us powerful insights into why we feel so tired all the time. And how maybe, just maybe, you're not a failure, but someone who's deeply in need of something this world has forgotten: meaning, silence, and rest. 1. Carl Jung and the crisis of the soul. Carl Jung believed that modern people weren't suffering from laziness, they were suffering from meaninglessness. He observed that when people lose touch with the deeper parts of themselves, the unconscious, the symbolic, the sacred, they become fragmented. This fragmentation doesn't show up as drama or chaos. It often shows up quietly, as exhaustion, boredom, anxiety, and disconnection. In Jung's words, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, and the world we live in rarely gives us the time or space to even try. Modern life pushes us to become outwardly successful, efficient, and productive. But Jung warned that this comes at a cost. The soul begins to starve. In his framework, every human being has an inner self, a core that needs attention, exploration, and expression. But when all our attention is focused outward, on work, social status, or image, we neglect this self. Over time, that inner emptiness grows. What we interpret as laziness may actually be the psyche's way of saying, I can't keep going like this. I need something deeper. Jung called the path to healing individuation, the journey of becoming whole by integrating the conscious with the unconscious, the light with the shadow. But here's the hard truth. Individuation requires withdrawal from constant noise. It requires rest, solitude, and reflection. And in a society addicted to doing, that looks like failure. But it's not. It's the beginning of real healing. So no, you're not lazy, your soul is trying to wake you up. 2. The Burnout Society. Byung-Chul Han's warning. Philosopher Byung-Chul Han offers a modern continuation of Jung's insight. In his groundbreaking book, The Burnout Society, Han argues that we're no longer oppressed by external forces. We're now oppressed by ourselves. We live in a world where everyone is expected to be an entrepreneur of the self. That means you're constantly selling, improving, and marketing yourself as a product. You're not just a person anymore, you're a brand, and that comes with relentless pressure. According to Han, this self-imposed productivity trap leads to what he calls psychic violence. You're not being forced to work by some tyrant, you're convincing yourself to keep going, to keep achieving, even when your body and mind are begging for rest. This creates a strange loop of self-blame. When you can't keep up, you don't question the system, you question yourself. Why can't I be more focused? Why am I such a mess? Why am I lazy? But it's not laziness, it's collapse. The most dangerous part of this system is that it hides behind positivity. Follow your passion, hustle harder, be your best self. These sound empowering, but they're often disguises for overwork and perfectionism. Han describes a society where people no longer feel free to be, they only feel free to perform. And when performance becomes your entire identity, burnout becomes inevitable. You aren't lazy, you're just done pretending. 3. Ancient wisdom and the return to soul. The antidote to this burnout isn't more productivity, it's more presence. And that's something ancient philosophers understood deeply. The Stoics, for instance, believed that peace doesn't come from doing more. It comes from doing less, with intention. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." The Stoic life is about simplicity, focus, and accepting what is, not what could be or should be, or what others expect. Similarly, in Taoism, there's a powerful idea called Wu Wei, which means effortless action or non-doing. It doesn't mean passivity, it means aligning your actions with the natural flow of life instead of forcing things. In Taoist thought, forcing leads to suffering, flowing leads to peace. What if your exhaustion is a sign that you're trying to swim against a current that's not yours? What if rest is not just a break, but an act of resistance? Even Carl Jung aligned with these ideas. He didn't just study the Western psyche, he studied Eastern thought, alchemy, mythology, and dreams. Because he knew the human being isn't just a worker. We are meaning makers, storytellers, spiritual creatures. And when we forget that, when we become obsessed with goals and achievements, we lose something sacred. You weren't designed to be a machine. You were meant to feel, to rest, to dream, to be. 4. Reclaiming your humanity. So where do you go from here? How do you reclaim your sense of self when the world keeps telling you to be more, do more, achieve more? First, you give yourself permission to stop, to breathe, to say no, to log off, to not know what comes next. This isn't quitting, this is healing. The modern world makes us ashamed of rest. But rest isn't weakness. Rest is recovery. Rest is remembering who you are when you're not performing. Carl Jung would say that healing begins when we stop resisting the shadow, when we listen to the parts of us that we've silenced. That voice in you that says I'm tired isn't your enemy, it's your guide. It's pointing you toward your unmet needs, your unhealed wounds, and your forgotten dreams. Don't ignore it, honor it. You're not lazy, you're human. And in a world that constantly dehumanizes us, remembering your humanity is revolutionary. You don't need to do more. You need to be more real, more rooted, more whole. That's not laziness, that's wisdom. 5. The illusion of constant self-improvement. One of the most dangerous myths in modern life is the idea that we must always be improving. Be better than you were yesterday, chase your potential, never settle. These phrases are everywhere. On social media, in productivity books, in our conversations. But what if this obsession with self-improvement is part of the problem? What if the constant drive to optimize yourself is not growth, but a disguised form of self-rejection? Carl Jung warned about this. He wrote that people often pursue perfection to avoid confronting the parts of themselves they find unacceptable. But healing doesn't come from becoming someone else. It comes from embracing who you already are. When we're always trying to be better, we lose the ability to be present. to rest, to enjoy life as it is instead of as it could be. The self becomes a project, never complete, never enough. Byung-Chul Han calls this the achievement subject. In this system, you are both the master and the slave. You push yourself harder and harder, believing you're chasing freedom, when in reality, you're deepening your chains. The truth is, some of the most meaningful changes happen when you stop trying to change. When you sit with your silence, when you accept your flaws, when you forgive yourself. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to simply be. Conclusion. You're not lazy, you're awakening. So let's return to where we began. You're not lazy, you're not a failure, you're not broken, you are a soul. Sensitive, thoughtful, overwhelmed by a world that moves too fast and asks too much. What you've been calling laziness might actually be the first sign that you're waking up. Waking up from a system that values your output more than your well-being. Waking up from the lie that your worth is tied to your productivity. Waking up to a deeper truth that your existence matters, even when you're still. Carl Jung believed that suffering has meaning, that it's often the soul's attempt to bring us back into alignment. Your burnout, your fatigue, your resistance to the grind may not be weaknesses, they may be wisdom. The body knows, the psyche knows. And when you finally listen, really listen, you begin to move differently through the world, not as a machine, but as a human being. So, what do you do now? You slow down, you unplug, you stop apologizing for being tired. You begin to ask better questions. Not how do I hustle more, but what does my soul need today? You allow yourself to rest, not as a reward, but as a right. If this message spoke to you, then you already know you're not alone. Subscribe for more content that speaks to the part of you that's been neglected for too long, your inner world. Leave a comment and tell me, what does rest look like for you, and more importantly, what are you no longer willing to sacrifice? Because the world doesn't need more burned out perfectionists. It needs more whole, awake, deeply alive human beings. And that includes you.